This is about as gorgeous as it gets. Penshurst Place in Kent is one of the most finely preserved medieval halls in the country. The hall was a totally different concept in living from the modern, small-roomed house of separate rooms that most of us live in today. From the outside of Penshurst, my first impression is of a large country estate that has expanded with the changing needs of time. But inside, beneath the red-tiled sloping roof, is the classic English hall that is largely unchanged since it was built in 1341. Yes, a hall. It gives a completely different meaning to the word hall. It is the biggest room. It is the room of the house, and it is big, and the roof is as high as the room, and the room's about 10 times higher than you would think would be necessary. It's very, very grand. In fact, it was called, apparently, the grandest room in the world when it was built, and it's like a sort of, almost a secular slice of a cathedral, but actually, that's not true, because the atmosphere isn't at all cathedral-like. It's not at all in that sort of mystical quality. In fact, it's very, very clear in here. Everything's very pinpoint clear. You can see there's a terrific amount of light. And immediately, one looks at this roof, which is a spectacular piece of construction, built of chestnut wood, not oak. It is, of course, completely geometrical. That is, it's all straight pieces of timber, almost all. And then it's just given these huge, gorgeous collars across the roof, and they support a king post in the middle, which then becomes like a tree at the top, just opens out. And just these few curves make the whole thing incredibly organic. The roof is then supported on these, well, absolutely marvellous figures who are probably the craftsmen that worked on the building. They've fortunately had their feet chopped off. Unlike the modern suburban house, the construction is visible. All materials on show are doing the work. A real timber-framed roof and solid stone walls to support it. There are details like this small step here, which looks like the most thoroughly impractical thing you could do, but presumably is to do with having a dais which the owner of the house can eat on or sit on above everyone else, because at that time in the sort of feudal system, you had to dispense justice from here as well. You didn't just feed people. I mean, you ran your estate. And so this room would have had very much a multifunction. People slept on the floor, and the next day it was a courthouse. You know, it must have been quite extraordinary. It is salutary to imagine this space filled in with floors and walls like a modern house, with most of its rooms wastefully empty most of the time. In order to organize all these differing uses without it turning into a chaotic super bedsit from hell, the hall has a very precise hierarchical layout, a plan which, it turns out, applies to all halls, from the grandest like this one to the smallest. Looking down from the dais end of the hall, from the master's point of view, is an enormous open fire, and there's no chimney in sight. Guests, servants, and workers would have sat at tables in this lower part of the hall facing the fire, and they would all have slept here as well. It suggests a great level of interpersonal tolerance to live life like this. At the other end, there's a wooden screen across the entrance called the cross passage. The screen, built in Tudor times, was added to keep out drafts and separate the dangerous kitchens beyond. The first step towards the modern house of separate rooms for different functions. Above the screen structure, the Tudors installed a minstrels gallery, where musicians could play to entertain guests in the all-happening hall. Penshurst Place is a very grand stone hall, but if you were a more humble person, you wouldn't be able to afford stone. Your hall would have been a timber-framed structure, built by the local carpenter.